In today's episode, we are going to talk about how do I set up a self-directed IRA. To help us with that, we have Edwin Kelly with Specialized Trust Company. So in previous videos, we have educated you guys on what is a self-directed, a truly self-directed account. For the purpose of this video, we're basically just going to be going over the process to set it up, assuming that you already know what a self-directed IRA is and some of the benefits of a self-directed IRA. To help us with that, once again, Edwin Kelly with Specialized Trust Company. Welcome back to the podcast, Edwin. How are you?
Jose, it is great to be back, man. Thanks for having me back once again.
This is by far one of my favorite topics and one of the topics that I'm most excited about. So let's jump right into it. What is the first step in setting up a truly self-directed account?
Okay, great question. The first step, and I'll say there's a couple of things because it really depends where you're starting from, right? Where most people are starting from is they have money in a retirement account already, right? So they already have it in a traditional IRA, a Roth IRA, an old 401k, 403b. Generally speaking, when we move money, and I shouldn't say generally speaking, pretty much every time, what we do is we always move money from same environment to same environment. So if you have a retirement account that's tax deferred money right now, we're going to move that to a tax deferred account. So it could be a 401k that it's in right now with a previous employer. We're going to move that into a traditional IRA, generally speaking, right? So what that means is there's no tax implications, there's no penalties, the money comes over. So the first step is to know what type of account you have, right? And then know that you're going to go from same environment to same tax environment. Another aspect of that first step is who do you want to be the custodian, right? Like who are you going to move it to? So again, we're under the assumption that everybody knows if you have your money in a bank or a brokerage or an old 401k, you can't self-direct that the way we've been talking about it in this series of podcasts. So you're going to choose a self-directed IRA provider. Now, not all self-directed IRA providers are created equal. So I'll make a couple distinctions of things to be aware of when selecting an IRA provider. So there's two types of companies out there. One are referred to in the industry as administrators. The second is referred to as a trust company or a custodian. What is the difference between the two? An administrator is a non-regulated entity. What that means is that they're not allowed to hold assets by law, right? That's why they're not regulated. So that's important to know because one of the advantages, and we'll talk about protections, I'll mention protections on self-directed accounts. But one of the protections that we all have, right, when we put our money in the bank is that we know that they're regulated, they're FDIC insured, right? Those protections come with us. As long as those things are in place, right, we feel pretty comfortable whether we have our money at Chase or Huntington or wherever we put our money at, right? Because we know that there's oversight on the institution. Mm-hmm. Administrators don't have that oversight. By contrast, trust companies, custodians do, right? We have a license that is issued by a state. So in our industry, the way it works is that licenses are issued by the state. We can be regulated by and are overseen by multiple government agencies, but one of the key regulators is what's called the Financial Institutions Division. Each state has one. And those are and is that government agency that is responsible for oversight of licensed financial institutions within their state. So my number one suggestion is always to work with a licensed custodian or trust company because you have that added benefit of regulation and oversight by a government agency. To me, that's very, very important. You look at historically, there haven't really been any issues too much in the industry, in banking or otherwise. When you look at a lot of the financial blowups that have happened in the past, some of the well-known ones, there was a lack of oversight, right? A lack of regulation on those institutions. So again, regulation I think is important. A lot of us, right, we like to joke about the government, but the government does serve an important purpose at times, right? And one of them is to make sure that everybody's playing by the rules. Well, if you're not regulated, there's no oversight. When you're regulated, there's oversight. So I would say first consideration is determining who you're going to have your account with. And so just knowing that you're going to deal with a licensed trust company or custodian will give you a lot of peace of mind, right? So I think that's really the first step, is identifying who you're going to work with. So separate trust company, custodian from administrator. Second piece of that is not all self-directed IRA trust companies allow clients to invest in everything. So there's certain companies out there who say, we really only hold physical precious metals. That's what they're really good at. So if you want to invest in real estate, you're not going to be able to do that there, even though it's a self-directed custodian. There's other custodians who say, well, we'll hold, a few different assets, but we may not hold a piece of real estate, but we'll hold a note or we'll hold an entity. Understanding when you open an account with a self-directed provider, what they're willing and able to hold and what they're not. Because the one thing you don't want to do is go to the trouble of setting up an account someplace, moving your money, and then submitting an investment, and they decline it because they're like, yeah, you can't do that here. So I think that's a very important thing to figure out ahead of time. Specialized, and there's not all self-directed custodians are like this, but specialized is one. Our philosophy is that we will hold anything allowed by the government, right? So if you want to do notes, physical precious metals, direct buy and hold real estate, like whatever, as long as the government allows it, we're able to hold it in the account. So understanding that, what your custodian will and will not hold is another important consideration.
And a good way to ask the custodian would be, what investments does your company allow, or what would be the right way to ask the custodian to find out if they allow everything that the government allows you to invest in?
Yeah, so there's a couple different ways to present that. If you know specifically what you want to do, but some clients do, right? Most clients honestly don't know specifically everything they want to do. They might have an idea in mind when they start an account.
Even for me personally, I would like to keep all options open, just because your investment philosophy may change over time, or there may be something that you aren't really aware of right now, but you may be aware of it a year from now. And at that point, if you have it open, it just gives you more flexibility without having to switch accounts.
Exactly. So one way to ask the question, so there's two ways to approach it. One way is, if you know specifically what you want to do, you can just say, hey, here's what I want to do. Is this something I'm able to have held in my IRA if I open it with you? That's one way to ask the question. Another way to ask the question, which is kind of what you're stating, right? You want to keep all your options open, even if it's not something you're doing now. You might want to do something different in the future. One way to ask the question is, will you allow me to invest in anything allowed by the government? Or do you have any additional restrictions on investments that I would want to do in my retirement account at your firm? So, like I said, because some companies do have limitations on certain types of assets. That's important to understand before you open the account. They have rules in place for various reasons. The reasons don't really matter, right? What matters is, are you able to do what you want to do with your money in your account? That's really what you're trying to discover. So asking a couple of basic questions will help you filter that out.
Got it. Okay. And then let's say that I select the right custodian. Let's say that custodian happens to be specialized. Let's just say that. What would be the first step, assuming that I select specialized, in transferring the funds over? What would be like the first meeting that I have with your company?
Yeah, so the first meeting, and I'll speak from our perspective because that's what I know, right? I've worked for other custodians in the past before starting specialized, and I will say that the process with the two previous firms I was with, along with specialized, are similar. So I'm going to assume that most self-directed custodians are going to operate in a similar fashion. But I'll speak from specialized process, so I know it works here. So the first step would be to establish or contact a self-directed specialist on the team. So you can do that by going to our website, filling out a form, requesting a call. Our 800 number's on there. You can call in and you'll get transferred to one of our specialists. At that point, the initial conversation lasts anywhere from 30 minutes to as long as you like it to last, because we want to make sure we address all your questions. But assuming that you know that you want to open an account or that you're seriously considering it, then most of this is done completely online, which is great now, right? So we will email you docs. You can complete them electronically. You can DocuSign the docs. There are occasionally some things that need to be actually signed, but our rep will go through all that with you. So they'll go over where your account is at. They'll help you get the paperwork and write the documents to establish your new account. They'll talk about anything additional that you need to send in, right, with that, because the way to think about it, and this is the way I always used to explain it or I do explain it when we're at events, is that filling out the application is not what actually gets the account open and the money over. There's a few other pieces that need to be done. So until that process is completed, we can't actually process and open the account and transfer the money. Again, that's all pretty straightforward stuff. Depends a little bit on the client situation, but that all happens in that initial phone call. So they'll go over fees, they'll go over the application, they'll go over the transfer process. They'll make sure that you have a thorough understanding of everything. And then after that call, right, you complete that process, submit everything. And then from that standpoint, right, the account gets open and the transfer process begins.
What questions do people typically ask in that initial consultation?
Some of them I've already addressed. So one of the big things that people want to know, obviously people want to know what the fees are. And so at Specialized, the way we did it was, because everybody, again, every platform is different. The way that we built it at Specialized was we said, look, people want different levels of service, right? Some people are going to be real active with their accounts. Some people are going to be less active with their accounts. And so the challenge with building a fee schedule is that you're trying to make it profitable for the company. You're trying to make it competitive and affordable for the client, but people do various things. So what we did was we kind of built the fee schedule in a way that it allows for a lot of customization. So clients go through so when they ask about fees, one of the great things about it is that our specialists will go through the different fees. There's things that are included, then there's things that are optional. So fees fall into three categories when it comes to self-directing. So this is one of the key things that people want to know. So there's usually an activation or a setup fee. That's a one-time fee only. There's typically an annual fee, and that's what covers most of what you're going to do with your self-directed account. And the third set of fees are what we call optional or service-related fees. So as an example, you mentioned, right, and I know obviously you're a client, Jose, and you do deals. So you might be wiring money. Well, the bank charges a wire fee, so that gets passed along to the account. That's not included in the annual fee, as an example. One of the elections that we offer at Specialized is that we have an upgrade to the basic account that includes a lot of those service and optional fees. So you pay one flat fee a year, because that's what a lot of clients like. I'd rather pay one flat fee and not have to worry about, these other kind of ancillary fees. So we have an option for that. So that's important to some people don't want it. So fees is one key thing. Another thing that people want to know is how long does it take to get the account open? Mm-hmm. Well, we open it same day or next day at the absolute latest, depending upon what time we receive, completed paperwork in the office. But that takes about 24 hours, you could call it, right? So the account open process, it happens very quickly. Another thing that people want to know, typically in that first phone call, is how long does it take for my money to come over? And, does it cost me anything for my money to come over? Usually what they mean is, am I going to have to pay taxes or penalties or what's going to happen? So what we say is that when you transfer money correctly and when you work with your new custodian, that's what you want to do. Don't do this on your own. Mm-hmm. Work with your custodian. That's why you pay the fees. When you work with your custodian, we will transfer money over, and it will come over so that there are no taxes and no penalties. So it comes over dollar for dollar. If you have $100,000 in your account currently, 100,000 shows up in your self-directed IRA, right? So that's a big question that people have. Another question that people have: how long does it take, right, for my money to show up and I can start to make investments? That is dependent on the contra custodian, meaning whoever holds your money now. Some custodians transfer money very quickly, within a week. Some companies take several weeks, right? So I say that the average probably is 2 to 4 weeks before the money shows up and you're ready to invest. So that's a typical time frame. That's another thing that I will just share with you and share with everybody listening, because one of the big mistakes that I see people make in the account open process, and I'll say this is a mistake. They'll say, well, a lot of times people say, well, I don't have an investment ready yet, so I'm going to wait till I get the investment ready, and then I'm going to call and open the account. The problem is that with a lot of the investments that people are making, particularly on a self-directed platform, right? Like you mentioned, like notes earlier, mm-hmm. right? And lending money to other investors. Well, if they have a closing next week, if you're going to be the one to fund that note, you have to wire the funds before the end of next week when they go to closing. If you don't have your account set up and the money's not in the account yet, you're not going to make that, because I just told you it takes 2 to 4 weeks to get the cash over. So we can get the account set up next day, but the cash isn't going to be here and ready to invest in time. So the big mistake people make is they say, well, I'm going to wait till I find my first investment and then I'll open the account. It's going to be too late, right? You're probably going to miss it. So a best practice is, as soon as you know you want to self-direct, get the account open, get the money transfer in process. Because what I always say is, no account, no money, no opportunity. You have an account, you have money in the account, you have all the opportunity in the world going forward.
Yeah. And it's interesting because when I decided to go truly self-directed with Specialized, I called my custodian at that time, which at that time it was ADP. And it was really confusing for me because they were like, no, you can't go self-directed because you're currently with your employer. But I was self-employed. I was the owner of the company. So what I ended up doing with you guys is you guys ended up jumping on a call with ADP, having a conversation with them. And then your representative actually told ADP or asked ADP the right questions. And when the right questions were asked, they gave me the right answers. And then they initiated the transfer of the funds over the right way. And that to me was really helpful. So in some of these initial consultations, you guys will even jump in with the custodian, with the present custodian, to be able to see if you're able to transfer that money tax-free, right?
Yeah. So, and I will say that that's part of the high touch.
Which I love that, by the way, because I had tried to do it years before and it was too confusing for me. Too many technical words.
Yeah. And so when we set up the firm, because to your point, there's a lot of people who get discouraged or dissuaded because they call the place where a lot of people, what a lot of folks do is they'll call the place where the money is currently, but they're talking about doing something different right from a self-directing standpoint. And so they don't necessarily know what questions to ask. They don't know the proper way to phrase something so that the person on the other end of the phone, who basically got trained for a couple of weeks and thrown on the phones to answer all the questions, right? Like that person doesn't have the knowledge to a lot of times connect dots and draw lines from what we're asking, right? So the best approach is let your self-directed custodian, right? So in this case, we're talking about Specialized. Since we take a high touch, a very personalized approach with all of our clients, that's what we do, right? We're big on three-way calls, because if you call on your own, again, like you said, you might ask the right question, but you might not ask it in a way that the person on the other end of the phone understands. We speak this language. We do it every single day, day in, day out. We know exactly what to ask, what the answers are, what the process is supposed to look like. And so we can dial that in very, very quickly. And I don't know how long you had to wait on hold to talk to somebody when you were on the phone with my staff calling the other firm. It is not uncommon. that I have staff members who will be on hold for 30 minutes with certain companies with the client on the phone, right? Yeah. Waiting for the customer service to pick up. But that's what it takes to get it done correctly, right? And to make sure you, right, you want to make sure you had the right information. You want to make sure you were doing everything correctly. And if that's what it takes, that's the extent we go to. And those calls are wildly beneficial, immensely helpful. And we're one of the few companies, as far as I know, that does it. But we do it because of those reasons, right? We can get, like, if you think about having to go back and forth between Specialized and the old company, like that could take you hours and weeks, and it's just it's not worth it. We'll expedite the process by jumping on the call with you if that's what you want, and we can get that stuff resolved very, very quickly.
Yeah, not only that, but it's confusing because of the different language that is used for specific types of transfers. So it makes it a lot easier. So one of the things that I also like about being self-directed is when I was with ADP, I didn't know what any of the fees were. So I didn't know, like, in the mutual fund how many fees were attached to the mutual fund. I didn't know any of the other fees. What I like about this is more or less like I feel like it's more transparent. Yes, there are fees. Yes, the previous custodian had fees, but it was very hard for me to, like, actually figure out what the fees. So if somebody is, let's say, shopping custodians, what would a typical activation fee and what is considered a red flag?
There really isn't one simple answer to that because everybody builds their fee schedules different, right? What I would say is, and Warren Buffett said this. Warren Buffett said, "Price is what you pay, value is what you get."
Yeah.
And that always stuck with me, right? Because there's times where you want to buy the cheapest thing on the block, and there's times where you don't, and like knowing the difference between that. So fees are different because one company could charge more for an activation fee or less for an activation fee, but then the annual fee is more or less, or they might have some transaction fees and those might be more or less. So what I always suggest is, when you're working with a self-directed custodian, and I view this as a lifelong, in fact, I'll go one step further and say that this is a legacy relationship,
Yeah.
right? So
I
to
agree.
me, it's a really important choice in choosing who you work with. I have a client as an example. We have many clients like this, but I'm thinking one particular person in mind who lives in Akron, Ohio, has been self-directing for decades, basically rescued his retirement, and then decided he wanted to rewrite his family legacy. And so now his two sons, who are now adults, have accounts with us, right? Eventually, they'll inherit his accounts. Um, so this is a relationship that lasts decades, right? If not generations.
Mhm.
And so the most important thing to me is finding, and by the way, I'll just say this is true with self-directing, but it's really more true in life, I think. I would much rather work with fewer people that are long-term in nature, long-term relationships, than have to go find new resources and relationships all the time, right? It's way more valuable to create a long-term relationship than have to go from relationship to relationship to relationship. So that's how I view it. That's my perspective on it.
Mhm.
That's how I assume. That's what I recommend people approach it. Who is an organization based on values, based on services, based on the communication, and based on fees? Who you'd want to work with long term, right? What resources, what support do they give you? What's their philosophy? Those are really important things because if you make the right choice up front, you never have to think about it again, right? You go on to the next thing. You focus on the next thing. But if you make a choice and you're not really happy with your choice, then now you're back to the same decision, but you're doing it all over again, right? And so now I got to move my account to here, or I want to move my account there. Or, this isn't exactly what I thought. So, um, yeah, I think looking at that first and foremost, and then just making sure that the fees, you're comfortable with the fees, you understand the fees, and that you feel that that is a fair value for the service you're getting in return. Because I will tell you, there are people that are more expensive than us. There are people that are cheaper than us, right? We know that. What we do is we've built a fee schedule to be able to deliver on the service, and charge a fair amount so that it's comfortable for the client for the service that they're receiving. I'll give you an example. Every morning we do daily lineup, and so we go over stats, week to date, and month to date. And so right now it's interesting because the numbers this morning, our service levels across departments, we were at 99.1%, which means we're operating right. Like, so that means if you submit an investment to go out same day, it went out the same day, right? 99.1% of the time. If you had a transfer that needed process, that transfer got processed 99, right, within our service level, like same day. So the service level is important because that's what you're paying for, right? You're paying for the service. So that's what I say. If you want, I'll give you an example. There's a custodian that's a competitor. They were significantly cheaper than us, but you couldn't call them and talk to anybody on the phone. I never thought that saying, hey, you can actually pick up the phone and call us and we'll answer within 30 seconds was a value add until competitors stopped answering the phone and stopped taking calls, and you have to do everything through chat online or through email, which I could just tell you that doesn't work well for a lot of people, particularly in something like this.
Yeah, because people have questions. So what would you say makes Specialized different than some of the other custodians out there?
I think there's a few things. So number one, we will allow you to invest in anything allowed by the government, right? So that's our stance. That's number one. So virtually anything you can imagine, as long as it's allowed by the government, you can do it in your retirement account with us. That's number one. Number two, I'll just piggyback off what we were just talking about, fees, right? We built the fee schedule so that there's options and it's customizable to you. So if something's important to you, you can elect it. If it's not important to you, you don't elect it. So you get to structure your own fees the way that you want them to be structured. To me, that's a huge value add. It is not a one-size-fits-all solution for people. Yeah. Number three, we offer a tremendous amount of education, training, and support. And to me, that is our value add, because there's so many custodians out there who, when you call them, they say, look, you just tell us where you want us to send the check, right? And if that's all you're looking for, that's terrific, right? That's perfect. But if you're one of those folks who say, look, I don't know exactly what I'm doing. I want more education and training on this. How do I maximize my account? How do I know I'm using the right account? Are there better accounts out there for me? I need a plan and a strategy. What are the do's? What are the don'ts, right? This is where education and training comes in. And so we have all kinds of education and training and support and assistance resources that we offer to clients. And like I said, that's the thing. When we came into the industry, I said, I don't want to be the Hyundai of the industry. That's not what we're going to be. We want to actually add value, right? So I always like to think of us more as a Tesla, right, than a Hyundai. If you think about Tesla, which I don't own one yet, but I'm actually thinking about picking up a Cybertruck. But anyway, when you think about Tesla, when you look at it from the outside, it looks like another, well, maybe not the Cybertruck, bad example. Let's just go with like one of their other cars. Yeah. It looks like any other car on the road, right? But then you get in it and you don't have to stop at the gas station on your way to work or your way home. In fact, now, right, the car will drive you to where you want to go. So it's very innovative. It's a car, it's familiar, and yet it's very different than anything else we've experienced. And that's really what I would say is a contrast between Specialized and the rest of the industry. What we do is very customized from every approach. We offer a ton of support, a ton of education, a ton of training.
Talk to us about the education and the training. Like, give us an example of what type of education or training you guys would provide or are providing.
So one of the things, and so for folks listening, right, if you're interested in something like this, when you call in, obviously talk about self-directed accounts, but you can also ask about our Platinum service. So Platinum is what we call, and we have different programs, but the Platinum one is kind of what I'll say is what we're most known for. So Platinum is a program that when clients come into this program, it includes our highest level service. So the first thing that happens is that we have what we call the Accelerated Wealth Quick Start class. And so you're asking me some questions. What is something like, what are the most common questions that people ask when they call in that first time to open an account? Well, guess what? Once you have an account, there's a whole new set of questions you have now. That Accelerated Wealth Quick Start workshop is designed to address all those next step questions. So it's about understanding the different accounts that are available to you, how to fund them. Do you have the right account? Or are there other accounts that might be more ideally suited to you, given what you want to accomplish, right? And what's important to you? What can you do with your account? What can you not do with your account? How do you structure investments with your account? You might have two accounts, and one has $100,000 in it and one has $10,000 in it. What do you do with that, right? How do you make that get to work for you very quickly? Those are all what I call the next step questions once you have an account established. So that's the Accelerated Wealth Quick Start Workshop, and that's the very first class in Platinum, right? From there, once people can complete that class, they walk out with a plan, two types of plans. They have their what we call their master plan. So I know what my goals are, I know what I want to accomplish, I know what accounts I have and what I'm using, how much I have to work with, and I have my investment strategy in place, so now I'm ready to move forward, right? So now after that, the question is, okay, well, what do they need next? So typically coming out of that, there's one of three directions that people go. One is they say, okay, I've got my account set up, I got money in my accounts, but now how do I find self-directed? How do I find investments? How do I evaluate them? We have a course for that, right? If some people come through the course saying, hey, look, I know that I can use other people's money to buy more assets in my account or outside my account, right? Either place. But how do I actually go out and get access to private money? Well, there's a course for that. There's some people who come out and say, look, I need really to drill down on my plan. I don't have it really ironed out yet. I need more detail in this. We have a course for that, right? So again, thinking through every step of the process, there is a next step, right? Depending, and again, everybody comes out and starts at a different point. That's why there's multiple options, because we know the most common questions that people have at the next step. There's ongoing education and training. So every month, right, we teach stuff. So like this month, the focus was on conversion strategies, moving money from a tax-deferred to a tax-free environment, and different ways to build up tax-free income in the future. And what are the reasons that you might want to do that versus saying tax-deferred, which is where most people's money is right now. And so we get into and dive into topics like that. We have a virtual mastermind for clients. So clients who want feedback from other successful clients, right? You can request a hot seat, and we do a live mastermind on a monthly basis when clients have a need for that. That's part of that program. I mentioned legacy planning, right? So what happens is when people start to have a lot of success, like you were talking before we started recording and came on air, right? You were talking about some of the things that you've done and the success that you're having. Well, it's not uncommon when we have a client like you who has success. What are you doing? You might open up an account for your spouse. You might open up an account for your kids. You might talk to your parents about it. Now, all of a sudden, you got multiple accounts. Well, with that particular program, again, it's based on what you want. With Platinum, you get education, training, coursework, unlimited household accounts for one flat fee. So whether you have one account or 100 accounts, it's one flat fee across the board. So now you're not worrying about individual account fees. You can open up accounts anytime you want, start making contributions, building those accounts up, right? Learning how to invest all those with various amounts of money. So that gives you an example of the education training. By the way, I'll say one more thing about the education and training. It falls into categories too. So there's what we would call like technical education, where we get into deep dives on rules and regs, different account types, tax benefits, tax implications, those kinds of things. There's also a section or a series that I call Shift. So part of self-directing is a shift in our mindset, a shift in our behavior, right? And so we talk about those types of topics. We have what I call insights and influences. Doesn't happen often, but once in a while, I'll bring on a guest expert to share something that, and that's the insight or influence, right? They're an expert in something that I'm not an expert in, but they've been a huge value to me in my self-directing journey. And so sometimes they come on, and I'll let people share their experiences. We have case studies, right? So clients come on. In fact, I was thinking about it. Right? You talking about what you've done with me, I'm thinking, that might be a great call for a platinum call 1 month is to have you kind of share what you've done and what you've accomplished with your accounts. So we do all those kinds of things. So you get an insight into what other people are doing and the really creative things and cool things that people are doing and how they're doing them. And then a lot of times people go and apply that to their own situation. So education comes from our community, from me, right? Other people in the company.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it's important because I think what ends up happening if somebody goes truly self-directed, now it's like, okay, now what do I do? Like what do I do? And I think that for some people, if you provide the education, what other people are doing to grow their account, I think that helps the people. And it sounds like that's something that separates you guys from just different companies. So let's say that my account gets funded, meaning that the money transfers, in my case, from ADP to Specialized. From the time that happens, how long or what is the process for me to make an investment? Let's say that I am investing and I'm making a loan to somebody. How long would that process take? What does that process look like to request the money to be sent to that individual who I'm making the loan for, and what type of paperwork's required for something like that?
Yeah, great question. So let's kind of put it in context here. So the first step was you establish your account, right? Which I said that happened same day or next day. Then we process the transfer. And like I said, that can take 2 to 4 weeks on average. Sometimes it takes longer, sometimes it's less, but I just say 2 to 4 weeks. So now you've got the cash available in your account. So now we're at the third step, which is you're ready to make an investment.
Yeah.
And so we have what we call the Direction to Invest form, DTI form, that's available on the website. But what I always tell people to do is when you're making your very first investment of any kind. So let me explain that. If you bought a piece of real estate in your IRA already, and now you're doing a note, but you've never done a note as Specialized in your IRA, you want to follow this process. I always say call in and have the client service team walk you through the Direction to Invest form step by step, so they'll ask you all the questions, right? Just like you said, the team got on with your contra custodian ADP, knew exactly what to ask, just needed a couple of questions, boom, got everything moving. Same thing. The team will ask you the right questions to tell you, okay, this is exactly what you need to send back. Here's how you fill out the DTI. It's only 2 pages, by the way. And here's the supporting documentation you need to submit, and we'll take it from there. And literally that's the process. So if you're going to do a lot of note investing, we'll call in on the first one, and if you feel like you've got it down after that, then you just do the same thing over and over and over again, and you never need to call in again on that, and you just submit the paperwork, right? And it comes in electronically. You submit it electronically, right? So it's all electronic. So in terms of timeframes, then, assuming that paperwork comes back complete, which it does most of the time, particularly if you're calling in right ahead of time. So you've got the DTI and you've got the supporting investment documentation that you need. That comes in. Then you really get to determine how long or how fast you want it. So we have standard processing is 3 business days. But if you want it done same day, we can do that. For Platinum clients, again, going back to that program, Platinum, you get what we call expedited processing, right, which is 24-hour processing, and that's available only to Platinum clients. So again, you got to determine that. Do you want it same day? Do you submit it early enough that standard processing within the next 3 days works for you? But you as the client really get to determine that.
So got it. So within 3 days, the money could be in whoever account I'm lending the money to, basically, in that specific situation. In most cases.
And just one thing to keep in mind, and again, this is a little nuanced thing, but I'll just mention it. And this is going to be true of all custodians. They'll all have their what they call their standard processing times, and as far as I know, standard processing time is 3 days across the board. Some might be a little longer than that, but I know ours is 3 days. So what does that mean to you as a client? If you say, hey, I want to make this investment, send a check. That means the check goes out in 3 days. That doesn't mean the check is there in 3 days. Very important distinction. That's one reason why I always recommend, look, when we're doing transactions, and this is the only way I do transactions, I wire funds, right? I always wire funds, whether it's a closing, a note, whatever it is, I always wire funds because I know when it goes out, they've got it. That if I get it out early enough in the day, which normally I do, they receive the money same day. Worst case scenario, they receive it, at the next morning, funds are wired. So,
anything else that you think would be helpful if somebody has already made the decision that they're like, look, I'm setting up a self-directed IRA. I'm doing this 100%. I understand it. Anything else that you think would be important in that process of helping them set up a self-directed account?
I would say, pay attention to the conversation, and is the rep asking you enough questions to really flesh out who you are, what you're trying to accomplish, and why you're doing this. I think those are important considerations. I will tell you that our reps are highly trained, have a lot of experience in the industry, and as a result, they will ask questions, and we do this a lot. In fact, one of the services that we offer, and this is an example of it, is what we call custom plan design, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's where we look at you as an individual, your business or professional situation, and your family. And then we'll actually build a custom plan design based on what you want to accomplish, reflective uniquely to your situation, right? Because the reason why I bring that up is that it's amazing how many times I've shared information with people when I'm having these conversations, and they're like, well, this is a way better account for me than this one. And it's like, yeah, but the way that came out was by us asking questions. So I know with our process, we ask the right questions to really uncover what's most valuable and important to you. But if you're not getting those questions when you're talking to someone, make sure you share that information. It's relevant. Why are you self-directing? What types of things might you do? What is your end game, or what is your goal? If you know what that is yet, from self-directing. Because just because you have a certain type of account doesn't mean it's the ideal account for what you're going to do. And that's where we can make suggestions, recommendations, present options to you based on what's most important to you.
So give me an example, because I've heard you say different accounts multiple times. And I've heard you say that different clients have, in some cases, multiple accounts. I'm only familiar with a couple of them, which is almost like a tax deferred and a non-tax deferred account. What are the different types of accounts that somebody can choose from? Or maybe give us an example where somebody was trying to accomplish something and there was a better account for them that you guys were able to make that suggestion.
Yeah, so I'll give an example, because you've mentioned at some point talking about private equity a little bit, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at private equity, so let me give you the scenario. Your client, you call in and you say, hey, I want to self-direct my account. And I'm not saying this is specialized necessarily, as it could be any custodian. And they say, great. So what kind of account do you have? Traditional IRA. Okay, I'll send you a traditional IRA application, fill it out, send it back. We'll set up the traditional IRA and transfer your money over. That makes perfect sense, doesn't it? You wouldn't think to ask or necessarily mention anything else. However, what I would do in this scenario is, hey, I got a traditional IRA, I want to self-direct. Great, what do you want to do? Well, I'm thinking about doing some private equity. Really? Okay, well, let's drill down and let me get a little bit more information about your situation, your business, right? That kind of thing. And so we do some fact finding, we have a conversation, and I say, okay, well, look, you can do a traditional IRA, and you could buy you can buy into private equity using your traditional IRA here, no problem at all. But let me make a suggestion to you. My suggestion would be that you consider the self-directed solo 401k instead of the IRA. And you say, well, okay, what's the difference between it?
Yeah.
Well, the rules are different with certain types of investments. So with private equity, the way private equity works, right, is that you have some equity, i.e. from you, and in this case, it'd be your retirement account, along with some other investors, right, who are going to put in money. And then the firm is going to go borrow money to round out the deal, right? And so you're going to have a combination of debt and equity. Depending upon how that's structured, because of the use of debt in the investment, if you do that in your IRA, it could trigger a tax, UDFI tax. Now, the investment sponsor may not tell you that, but I'm telling you that because I want you to know that ahead of time. I don't know if it will trigger UDFI or not, but here's the thing. If it would, in an IRA, we do that same investment in a solo 401k, you won't be exposed to the UDFI tax. So based on the type of investing you're talking about doing, the 401k, in my opinion, sounds like it might be a better fit. If you have a particular private equity investment in mind, go find out and ask them, right? You can ask them these questions to see if they know. If you don't have a private equity investment in mind, that's okay. I'm just letting you know that some investments, when they structure them this way, can trigger this tax that people are unaware of, but it applies to IRAs. It won't apply to your 401k. So if this is what you think you want to do, the 401k could be a much better option for you than the IRA in this particular case.
Can you name different types of accounts as well too? So there's a solo 401k. Can you name?
Depending upon, and this is where if you said to me, look, Edwin, I'm going to invest this money for the next 20 years. I want to create an income stream so that I can step out of my business. And this is an income stream that's going to support me and my wife, right? When I don't have the business anymore. Well, if you're all in tax deferred money, one of the things I'm going to say is, well, look, if you're talking about investing this for the next 10 to 20 years, and then you're talking about spending it for 20 to 30 years after that, that's a long time of compounding. That's a lot of income you're going to generate. Let's sit down and let me show you some math. You might want to do this in a Roth instead of this traditional. You might want tax-free accounts instead of tax-deferred accounts. Now, tax-free accounts could be IRAs, 401ks, because you can do those tax-free too, right? Different types of accounts. But now we're talking about tax treatment. Given what you want to accomplish, what's most important to you, what your end game looks like, a stream of income that you and your wife will never outlive. Well, depending upon where you're starting at and what that looks like in the future, one way to achieve that faster and easier is to eliminate taxes from having to pay taxes at all in the future, which Roths will do. But secondly, protecting the gains and all the income you're going to make from taxation. And I can show you math where it's like, hey, the Roth is compelling. Why would you ever want to do this in a tax deferred account, given where you're starting from right now and where you're heading to? So switching tax environments, could still be an IRA, but tax environment can make all the difference between success and failure in that scenario. I know because I run the math and I'll do that with clients. So that's why I say, just because you have an account right now, if the only reason you have the account you have right now is because, well, that's what they told me to open, or that's what they opened for me, and that's where all my money is, that's not a valid reason to stick with that account. Let's validate that reason. Let's make sure that that is the account that is ideal for you, given what you want to accomplish. We might find out in that process it absolutely is, and we might find out there's better options. At the end of the day, you're the client. You get to make all these choices for yourself, and that's the beautiful part about self-directing. That's what I love about it. We'll give you the information. What you do with it is entirely up to you. What I don't like is when people come to me and they have something and they like, man, I wish I would have heard this 10 years ago before I got to this point in my journey. It's like, yeah, they never heard it because either they didn't know to ask, or the people they were talking to didn't ask the right questions, or they didn't know, or whatever it is, right? But just by having a conversation and asking a few of the right questions, I know that we can uncover and I help create an ideal solution for what clients want to accomplish and what's important to them and what reflects them, right? This is custom. This is not cookie cutter. A lot of people take a cookie cutter approach. We don't do that here. That's when you say what's the difference between specialized and others, I'd say that's the biggest difference right there. We don't take cookie cutter approach. Everything we do is customized. But if you're talking to someone who's not taking that approach, then make sure you share this information so that what's important to you and what you're planning on doing, so that they have the opportunity to maybe make some recommendations or give you some other options.
Yeah, agreed. 100%. I'll kind of share a little example for me, and just to be transparent, Edwin, I really, really like being self-directed. I feel like I have more control over the retirement funds that I have in there. And I read a book. It was called The Banker's Code, and it basically talks about private lending and lending on things that are backed by collateral or like real estate. But I'll give you an example. So if you lend your money out at 10%, that means that every 7.2 years, your money will double. So like, let's say you start off with a $250,000 account at age 37, which I am. At 44, if you continue lending out that money, it'll be 500,000. At 51, it'll be $1 million. At 58, it'll be 2 million. At 65, it'll be 4 million. If it just continues to grow at 10%, or if you continue to lend out the money at basically 10%, which is insane to me how an account can double every 7.2 years if you double it. So for me, it's been life-changing. And that's the reason I'm basically doing a lot of different episodes on this. Any final words, Edwin, on this, or anything else that you think would be helpful for viewers?
Yeah, so the numbers you just gave are super powerful. And there's two assumptions that are built into the illustration you shared. The first assumption is that you're earning that consistently.
Correct.
Which, if you look at the stock market, it goes up, it goes down, it's not consistent.
Mm-hmm.
So one of the advantages to self-directing is that you can create more consistency by investing in things that you know and understand, and like you said, are backed by a real asset, something that has actual value. That's number one. Number two, when you say it grows to this and it's worth that, that's assuming there's no taxes on any of the gains or income you're making along the way. And that also assumes that you can spend it tax-free. And you can when you use the right retirement accounts. That's the key. If you're doing that outside of a retirement account, you're not going to get the same result because you're paying taxes along the way. You're going to get taxed on all the earnings and income and everything else that comes along with it. So what I always tell people is, why pay taxes when you don't have to? Understand, you have a choice. You have more power than you realize. It's arming yourself with a little bit of knowledge and getting the right tools in place, like the self-directed accounts, because you can absolutely make that happen if you take taxes out of the equation and you create consistency in your returns, both of which are the hallmark of self-directed retirement accounts.
And that's what you can do with the self-directed account, basically. Exactly. Because you're getting rid of the taxes, which means that instead of paying the taxes, your money's actually growing without paying the taxes every single year. And then if you can lend it out the money or find an investment that pays you a consistent return, then that's how you're able to achieve all this. So, Edwin, if somebody wanted to get in touch with you, like let's say somebody wanted to set up their self-directed account, what's the best way for them to do that?
Yeah, go to the website. Our 800 number is right there on the website. You can call in or you can fill out the form, like I said, and we'll get right back to you. This website is www.specializedtrustcompany.com. Specializedtrustcompany.com. Very straightforward, just the name of the company.com.
I love it. All right. Thank you so much, Edwin. Today's episode, we covered how do I set up a self-directed IRA. We had Edwin Kelly with Specialized Trust Company. If you've enjoyed this episode, make sure to hit that subscribe button. If you feel that this episode will be helpful, make sure to hit that share button. Thank you again. Appreciate your time. And until next time.